Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Shin, and I'm the Outreach Manager at TutorCore. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month. In honor of that, we wanted to think about how we could support the mental health of specifically students with dyslexia. And so we bring today an interview with Celebrate Dyslexia's Executive Director, Jasmin D. So, as the Executive Director of Celebrate Dyslexia and a parent of children with dyslexia, you have a clear commitment to increasing awareness and a positive, supportive awareness of dyslexia. And even the name of your nonprofit, Celebrate Dyslexia, signals your strengths-based approach to dyslexia. Can you tell us a little bit more about this approach?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. And this is my favorite topic, so I'm always happy to talk about it. Celebrate Dyslexia has a mission to celebrate, educate, and empower the 1 in 5 with dyslexia. And ultimately, we are here to support all those who love, teach, and employ them. And so, the reason why it's so important to talk about the strengths is that in order to be dyslexic, while you might have this island of weakness that Sally Shawitz has taught us to say, you do also have a sea of strengths. And so often in our education environments, dyslexic kids' weaknesses are what are focused on, and they don't really have opportunities to exhibit their strengths. So we are committed to changing the stigma around dyslexia, really promoting earliest identification for best outcomes with intervention. And in order to do that, it is so important for families to understand that this is not necessarily a bad thing, that it's very treatable, and their kids are smart. They have a lot of strengths and they have so much to offer. We just need to use a different approach in teaching them how to read and give them the skill sets to know how to use accommodations and overcome any barriers that they may have to education. And so, in order to do that, we have to be committed to celebrating dyslexia. We have to be committed to having the strength-based approach and allow families to love their children and enjoy the time with their children, focusing on their strengths and allowing them to explore their strengths.
I absolutely love this approach, Jasmine. As a former SPED teacher, you want to celebrate these positive aspects of your children and, their strengths, in addition to acknowledging where those strengths might also appear as weaknesses in other areas, and then figure out how they can find success anyway. So, what would you say are some ways in which parents, guardians, teachers might be able to apply this approach, whether at home or at school?
Well, contrary to popular belief, I think a lot of parents feel that they need to become the teacher at home, and for obvious reasons, because their kids are behind. And as parents, we do what we can to support our kids. We don't want them to struggle. We don't want them to be behind. But what we really need to allow ourselves to do is understand that the brain needs to rest and our kids need time to explore their strengths. Their brains have been on fifth gear all day long at school. And so the time to start the learning is not necessarily when they get home. If they're not learning at school, something has to change. We need to have another IEP meeting. Need to have another 504 meeting. A different approach needs to be taken, and ideally, intensive dyslexia intervention in order to get those circuits rewired in the brain and operating in full capacity. And so parents really can just enjoy their children.
Mm.
They will have a skill set and advocacy with their kids, clearly because of everything that dyslexia brings to the table. But you don't have to spend every night at the dinner table. If you do, let it be something that your kids really enjoy to do with you, whether that be art, whether that would be puzzles, whether that would be reading together, whether that would be watching movies after you've read a story to your kids and comparing and contrasting, whether that would be throwing a ball outside, going for a walk. Our children need a break, just like we do as adults. We burn out if we go full steam ahead all the time. And sometimes I know as a parent, I was also guilty. As soon as my son would come home, it would be open the binder and let's get at it. Let's start going. And just allowing our kids to rest and really explore their strengths is just the biggest advice I could give to parents. I'm not saying that they shouldn't advocate. I'm not saying that they shouldn't pursue dyslexia intervention if it's in their area and their school doesn't offer it. However, the rest of the time,
Mhm.
they get to just be kids.
Yeah. I love that it sounds like you're emphasizing that, with students, like when they go home, they need time to be kids.
Yeah.
They need their parents to, be present with them, playing with them, exploring, other interests that maybe at school they're not able to. And that just sounds like a really cohesive, larger view of the child, outside of just how they're doing in school.
And really, because we're talking about mental wellness,
Mhm.
the extra insight that I can give into this is that with repeated failure, academic failure in school, comes anxiety, shame, a natural removal of discourse from their peers simply because if all of their friends are reading Harry Potter and they can't,
Mm,
then they're not having those conversations on the playground or in the hallways
mm,
with their peers that are age appropriate. And then ultimately will be very restrictive to different life choices that they have.
mhm,
So, to allow our kids to experience success when they come home, in whatever that is. If it's music, then they can enjoy practicing their instrument. If it's theater arts, then they can engage with their peers in theater arts in a way that makes them feel successful. And that's all very important for a child to learn for mental health,
mm.
that they are whole,
Yeah.
that they aren't alone, and that they do have strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love hearing that. And I know that something you mentioned just a minute ago is also figuring out, well, how can parents and guardians advocate for students? And so when we do see that students are facing learning challenges, what are some ways in which parents and guardians of students with dyslexia can advocate for or support their children?
Well, getting the identification in the system cannot be overstated. It is so important to go ahead and get that testing and get that identification. And so there is a system in place, a framework in place for them to get the services and the resources that they need. That's not to say that that's always going to be smooth either, because most likely you'll have a good year and then you'll have a couple of bad years, and you'll have to keep making sure that everybody in the team of educators that works with your student are well versed into what is written in the IEP or 504. Every state is different, is nuanced a little bit differently in their processes. Every campus, every district has a different culture, and every campus has a different culture. So it's really important that the parents know kind of the logistics of getting the identification and really ask a lot of questions about every line item of the IEP and 504 determination to really understand it is almost a foreign language.
Right.
Lots of acronyms, lots of different testing that looks at different nuances. So, the more information that the parent can come to the table with and understand, the more effective that time at the table is going to be for them. And then the other thing that I highly recommend is that the student come right up alongside the parent at those meetings.
Mm,
The first couple of years, the student might not participate as much, but there will be certain questions that are asked in these meetings that, as a parent, quite frankly, I didn't know the answer. I
mm,
don't have the privilege of sitting next to my child all day, every day in school and see how they respond to every assignment, but they do.
yeah.
And so they should be able to have a say as to what works and what doesn't work. When they're newly identified, they might not know what works, and that is totally okay. There is a large menu of accommodations and options for them to experiment with until they get older and know, well, this set of accommodations really works for me. The others really aren't as effective. But until we get to that point, we have to all be on the same table that we're going to have all accommodations written in the plan so that the student can experiment with what works and what doesn't work. And I guess I'm transitioning a little bit. You didn't specifically ask this, but to make sure that teachers have the resources that they need so that they understand how to implement those accommodations in their lesson planning.
Absolutely. I mean, I love this empowering of students. And, in my experience too, whenever you have a student who is in the meeting, who is informed on, what their part is there, which is essentially the IEP is for them. So to be like, hey, you know what? I, really hate actually being pulled out for testing. Maybe I actually want to stay there and then see how that works for me because personally, I prefer that and having
Mhm.
the student have the space to be able to communicate, hey, these are the things that I want as supports,
Mhm.
as opposed to necessarily just having it decided for them. So
Right.
I love that incorporation. And, when it comes to the teachers and supporting teachers in, providing the necessary and most beneficial supports for their students with dyslexia, is there anything that you would want to recommend or point out as things that have worked really well?
Honestly, teachers are at ground zero in this conversation. Many teacher prep programs have not included robust differentiated learning, information about accommodations versus modifications, let alone best practices in teaching reading, especially working with dyslexic students or neurodivergent students. So the research is there. It is the action gap that we need to fill. And so I really recommend that these teachers, if it's not working, don't keep doing it.
Mhm.
Really look for resources that are evidence based,
Mhm.
that have results behind them, that are sound, and pursue those professional developments. Because the more tools our teachers have in their kit, the more successful they will be in working with students. There are lots of fads that come and go, especially with dyslexia. There is no magic pill or quick fix. It is a systematic process and systematic approach, a diagnostic approach to teach a child how to read. So, really focusing on the science of reading and structured literacy is key if the teacher is going to truly find holistic success with every child in that classroom, including dyslexic children.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to go ahead and share this information to support parents and teachers and hopefully students directly as well, empowering them to celebrate dyslexia. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
Thanks for having me. It was a privilege.
Thank you for taking a moment to watch this video. One part of our conversation that particularly resonated with me was when Jasmine spoke about how repeated academic failure in school can affect students' mental wellness, how it connects to feelings of anxiety or shame, and how it can affect or limit students' social interactions. This really emphasized the significance of giving students with dyslexia opportunities to exhibit their strengths, getting students assessed and identified to receive support, providing the interventions, accommodations, and options that can help them overcome barriers to their education, and ensuring that they can have fun and explore their individual interests. We hope that this interview gave you some ideas on how to take a strengths based approach and better celebrate dyslexia.